Hello, Dr. Barnard, and welcome to the podcast. How you doing today?
I'm doing great. It's great to be with you today.
It's a pleasure to have you.
Thank you.
Locally, be in person with you here in
Yes,
Windsor.
super.
We're at the Windsor Veg Fest, and this is going to be a fun
First
day.
annual.
Yeah, I wouldn't miss it.
So what we want to focus in on today, Dr. Barnard, is your book, Power Foods for the Brain, and get into what these are and how they can affect us. And let's just start off by talking about how can food actually impact the brain and how the brain functions.
Well, until fairly recently, people thought there's no connection at all. It's what you eat has nothing to do with your brain power. And when we look at the worst conditions like Alzheimer's disease, for example, or other dementing illnesses, people have assumed that it's all old age. Or maybe you're at genetic risk, but it doesn't have anything to do with your lifestyle. Well, the page really turned. In 1993, a research study got started in Chicago called the Chicago Health and Aging Project. And they discovered that people who were eating in certain ways tended to be protected from brain problems, and people who ate in other ways didn't do so hot. And what they found is not going to surprise you, because it turns out that whatever is really bad for your heart, saturated fat, cholesterol, smoking, they're also really bad for the brain. So the first thing they found was that people who ate the most saturated fat, think of bacon grease or cheese fat, they had 2 to 3 times the risk of Alzheimer's disease compared to other people. And many other findings came out. Bottom line, though, this opened the door to realizing that the brain needs good nutrition just like the rest of us and the rest of the body. And if it doesn't get it, you run into trouble.
So what do you say to all the research coming out now with all the saturated fat, the movement for saturated fat, the case for saturated fat for brain health? Because we're seeing a lot of that these days. So what do you say to that?
I think it's really completely nonsense. What we have seen in the past several years is that industry fights back. The egg industry was this way. Cholesterol isn't a problem. You should eat eggs. Well, that is very thin. When you look at the science of it, cholesterol in an egg that you swallow does go into your body, and your blood cholesterol will rise. And it's really quite easy to see the flaws in those findings. In fact, if you don't mind, I'll give you a quick illustration of this. If I take a vegan person who's not eating any eggs, no meat, no dairy, they got a low cholesterol level. They're not eating any cholesterol because cholesterol is in animal products. I take that person and I give them an egg a day or a couple eggs a day. Their blood cholesterol level will rise. It'll go up. And this is no surprise, because cholesterol in food adds to your body, just like, say, if you eat sugar, will your blood sugar go up? Sure it will. If you eat cholesterol, will your blood cholesterol go up? Of course. However, if you do a research study where you decide, I'm not going to have any of those people in my study, I'm going to only include in my study people who are eating lots of bacon and lots of eggs all the time, and then I give them one more egg and I see if I can tell any difference. And there, you don't see much of an effect. It's like a person who's smoking 3 packs a day, and I say, add 2 more cigarettes. Would I notice any real effect? No, you don't. So bottom line, cholesterol matters as much as it ever did, but the egg industry found that there are ways to concoct studies or interpret studies to try to minimize the effect, and that's what they've been doing. Same with the saturated fat people. There is no question at all, I mean zero, whether saturated fat is bad for your heart. It clearly is. And you can be swallowing cheese fat or bacon fat or chicken fat for that matter, and your blood cholesterol is going to go up. Your risk of heart disease goes up, as does your risk of brain problems. But there are various ways that industry has tried to fight back. So, and for all the people who are listening to this thinking, man, one day it's, cholesterol is bad, the next day it's good. Hey, I feel your pain. Because industry's smart, and they have been working in this direction for a long time.
Okay, let's take time and focus in on the book and some of these power foods for the brain.
Yeah.
What are some of the specific ones, and how can we go about including more of them in our day-to-day routine?
Okay, first of all, bad list, good list. Bad list is, I was mentioning saturated fat. The number one source of saturated fat is actually dairy products. So if that cheese board is looking attractive, start thinking about Alzheimer's disease, and suddenly the healthy part of Swiss cheese is the whole. That's the part to eat. And meat is the second biggest source of saturated fat. So saturated fats are bad. Second on that list is trans fats. So donuts,
Fried foods.
Many fried foods, yeah. They're called trans fats or partially hydrogenated vegetable oils. They're bad too. On the good list, vitamin E has been shown to cut the risk of Alzheimer's by about 50%, which is huge.
And what are some top foods?
Yeah, I'm glad you used the word food because it's not pills. When they look at vitamin E pills, they don't seem to have that effect. But the foods, you'll see some of it in spinach and mangoes, but a lot more in nuts and seeds. Mm-hmm. If you pour some sesame seeds or walnuts into your hand, about the time it hits your fingers, that's an ounce. And an ounce of nuts or seeds has about 5 milligrams of vitamin E, which is plenty. By the way, here's a tip. Don't eat them. Crumble them up and put them on your salad. Because if you just throw them in your mouth, you will fill your hand again. Mm-hmm. And pretty soon you will be in the middle of a smokehouse nut binge. And you know what I'm talking about.
Never ending.
Yeah, exactly. There is something addicting about them. So I use them as a condiment, not as a snack. A couple other foods I might mention. Researchers at the University of Cincinnati looked at people who were already having memory problems. They were already in their late 70s and forgetful. And what they tested was blueberries. And they took blueberry juice and gave them 2 cups of it a day. And after 3 months, they showed that their memory and recall was substantially better. And what they believe is happening is that the pigment is called anthocyanins. They're powerful antioxidants. So it's been shown with blueberry juice, also been shown with Concord grapes. By the way, the moral of the story is not that you have to eat that food, but you should think about color. Carrots have antioxidants, beta-carotene. Tomatoes have lycopene. These are all antioxidants. One last one, let me mention. If you go to Okinawa, Japan, longest lived people on the planet, their main staple is not fish at all. It's not even rice. It's sweet potatoes. Just sweet potatoes all the time. It's their big thing. And in America, we remember sweet potatoes because I think my grandma used to make them once in a while. We forget these foods. They cost pennies, and they are so nutritious. They don't have any saturated fat, no trans fats, but they're loaded with beta-carotene, which is why they're orange, and build them into your routine. They're a power food, too.
You like to hear that, Amar?
Yeah, I don't have a problem with that. My absolute favorite food. That is my island food. That is the food. If there was nothing left on the planet, that's what I would want to be left with.
Yeah, absolutely. They're fabulous. They really are.
So when we're talking about brain health, we're talking about cognition, we're talking about memory. What other areas do we want to enhance when it comes to the brain?
Let me give you one more.
Okay.
We do a lot of research studies at the Physicians Committee. People go on a vegan diet, they got diabetes, and they get better. Or they are overweight, and they lose weight, they got high cholesterol, they get better. But a month or two later, they say, I'm doing so great. I've lost 50 pounds. I'm feeling great. But I really miss cheese. You think, what's that about? What little devil inside your head is saying, despite the fact that you're so much healthier now and all your friends are complimenting you on your fabulous, vibrant appearance, you want to dive back into cheese? What is that about? And what it's about is dopamine. Dopamine, D-O-P-A-M-I-N-E, is this chemical in our brain that rewards us. That's its purpose. And it rewards us for finding healthy food. It rewards us for intimate encounters that will prolong our species, if you catch my drift. And that's what it's for. But it turns out that certain things will trigger dopamine release, like alcohol, tobacco, every drug of abuse. That's the reason people abuse heroin or cocaine. It's because it stimulates dopamine. Well, some foods seem to do this too, including cheese. So, what do we do about it? We have to build into our lives healthy dopamine sources, like friendships. I know this sounds funny to say, but a person who is alone versus a person who's got a big social life, the person who's alone is set up for going to their refrigerator at night and pigging out on cheese or booze or whatever it might be. Exercise. A person who's absolutely sedentary tends to have more disordered eating habits than people who exercise a lot. Exercise gives you a little bit of dopamine. Extra points if you are exercising with other people, then you get the 2 dopamine sources, the socialization and the physical activity. And one of my favorites is music. This is a little bit of a surprise to people, but why do people like music? Well, it turns out that it triggers dopamine release too. And as long as it's music you like, if you hate it, no, it's not going to work. So why are Zumba classes so popular? Because you're hanging out with other people, moving your body, and listening to music. So don't get me wrong. I am not saying that this can overpower heroin, but what I am saying is in our lives, an apple gives you a little bit of dopamine, we feel good, but then people figured out candy gives you a lot more. And if you break away from the bad foods and kind of start forgetting about them, you get the dopamine you need from the good foods. And if you enrich your life with social support and exercise and music and all kinds of fun things, then you get these sources together.
I'm so glad you brought up lifestyle factors because I think people forget about that. We're so reliant on food, and all these other areas in our life are huge contributing factors to ultimate health. So I'm happy you brought those up.
They're enormous. When I was in medical school and residency, I always had bands that I played in, and still to this day I write music and record it. And if you have fun in your life in a healthy way, it's good. Plus, Beethoven has no calories.
Well, one area we definitely have to talk about before we leave the subject of brain health is omega-3s. When brain health comes up, I think for a lot of people, that's the first thing that comes into mind. And there's that argument in the plant-based world, we can get ALAs, but not the DHA and EPA. I know this is a subject that's over time.
Hey, is this going to be on the test?
This is a subject that's been kind of beaten to death over time,
Right.
But due to the subject matter of this interview, I think we got to go there. And let's talk about getting ALA and how that can convert, and how do you go about making sure you're getting enough omega-3s on a regular basis?
This is an area where people are still exploring. And I don't know if anybody has the bottom line, last word. But I'll tell you what I think. First of all, you do need omega-3. And you can get them the same place the fish gets them. I mean, fish don't make omega-3, they convert omega-3. They'll get them from algae or whatever, and we get them from plants too. As you said, ALA or alpha-linolenic acid is the basic omega-3. And there is a lot of it in plants. If you took a leaf of broccoli or spinach or, other green vegetables and you sent them to a lab, they would say, there's not a lot of fat in this. But what there is, proportionately, the fat that's there, proportionally is very, very high in omega-3. And our bodies have all the enzymes you need to take that ALA and convert it to the others, like DHA, as you mentioned. But people will say, but wait a minute. In most of us, if you do a scientific study on it, that conversion's really, really slow. I'm sure this is what you're hearing. So you ought to just eat fish and then you'll get the DHA. Well, why is that conversion slow? It's because we have a set of enzymes that's trying to lengthen that ALA into a longer molecule. And if you're eating lots of other kind of grease in your diet, it occupies those enzymes and they can't really do the job they're designed for. So, bottom line, you don't need the fish at all. You're better off without it because it has some saturated fat, maybe not as much as beef, but it's got plenty. It's got cholesterol, doesn't have any fiber, plus mercury and tapeworms and heaven knows what else is in there. Bottom line, you don't need the fish, and if you get plenty of green leafy vegetables, you'll get the traces of omega-3 that you need. And as long as we're not diluting it with a lot of excess added fat, we're going to be fine. Now, if you're nervous and you want to go to the store and you want to buy DHA, they sell vegan DHA, which you can take if you want. But I have to say, whenever I hear anyone who's supplementing with omega-3, it's a little bit like the people who are overdoing it on salmon up in the polar regions. They bleed a lot. Because, in fact, that may be part of why omega-3s reduce the risk of heart disease. They interfere with clotting. Well, sometimes you don't want to bleed. And try this at home. If you cut yourself shaving, just notice how long it takes to stop if you've been taking your omega-3s. It can be a little bit scary. So, bottom line, get them from food. That's especially the green leafy vegetables.
Great. So is there anything else we can share with the listeners that they can do or anything that they can take for brain health?
Well, the recipe that I see it as is avoid the bad guys. That's the saturated fat and the trans fats especially. And one more bad guy I should really mention here, and we left out earlier, metals, iron and copper. You need tiny traces of them, but when people get into iron-rich red meat, thinking that it's somehow good for them, they're getting too much iron. And copper is very, very high in liver and some other foods too, but it's also in multiple vitamins. They add copper and iron to them. Get them if you're getting multiple vitamins, get the ones that don't have any metals added. But you can find them online. They're called vitamins only. So if you avoid those, I think that's really, really helpful too. And then eat for color. The human retina was designed to detect color, not just because colors are pretty, but colors are a sign of nutrients, specifically antioxidants. And so if you're eating colorful vegetables and fruits, you're going to be getting the antioxidants that you need for other things, but your brain sure needs them.
Well, since you brought up metals, I think it's really important to quickly address the importance of good cookware, because what people are cooking on, you're only as good as what you're cooking your food with. So can we talk about some of the leaching toxic metals that are affecting our food?
Yeah, and really it ought to be simple. It should be simple because in the world of science there's been a big fight about aluminum, for example. And the idea was aluminum is cheap. You can get a perfectly good pan made of aluminum, and yeah, the aluminum gets in your spaghetti sauce, but who cares? And if you look in the brains of people with Alzheimer's disease, they very often have aluminum in the brain. And there are good researchers who say that doesn't matter, that's not it, that's not the issue. But in industrial accidents, when people have been exposed to high levels of aluminum, they have brain damage. While they're fighting it out, don't buy aluminum cookware unless it's got a coating over the aluminum so it doesn't touch the food. And how hard is that? It's really easy. But the other thing is you're not buying cookware every week. Get good cookware that you're going to use for years and years and years and years. So it should be super easy to do.
And cookware aside, are there other areas in our life that we need to really pay attention to where we're getting this toxic burden coming in?
Cookware is a big one. Copper pipes is one. A lot of people have copper pipes in their home, and the water stays in the pipe all night long, and you fill your coffee maker with all this extra copper. And people haven't heard about copper in the brain, but they really should pay attention to it because it's emerging as very likely a major contributor to Alzheimer's risk.
Okay. Are they still using copper in the pipes?
All the time.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, all the time. You can wash your hands with it.
Yeah.
You can probably shower with it and, wash a car, all that kind of stuff, but I wouldn't drink it.
Okay.
I guess avoiding canned foods too, because we shouldn't be eating out of a can, right?
Fresh is always better,
Yeah.
for sure. But the steel cans are probably okay.
Yeah.
I would think. Don't forget to get your exercise. Get some intellectual exercise too.
Sleep, big time.
Oh
Important for the
man,
brain health.
hey, I'm glad you mentioned that. That is the big violator, and it's partly because we're busy, partly just because there's so much entertaining stuff going on. Who wants to go to sleep when
Netflix.
there's
Man.
everything? But, however, if you look at people who don't sleep, back when I was in residency, you worked all night much of the time. Your memory would drop right off after about 3 or 4 days, and your emotional control is no good either. When you sleep, the beginning of the night, which is what's called slow wave sleep, if you look at an EEG tracing of a person's brain, slow wave sleep is the brain filing away all the things that you learned during the day so you can find them later. If you were awake all that time, the brain can't do that filing process and you can't remember anything. The second part of the night, in the early morning hours, you're dreaming. And that's REM sleep. And that's often when the brain is integrating emotions. And look at a person who stayed up all night. My daughter was crying all night, so I didn't sleep. That person's grumpy. They can't remember. They're just not at their best. So my number one sleep tip is 10 o'clock. I don't care how good your book is. Turn it out and go to sleep. And wake up early if you want to, but get that extra sleep, and you're going to feel like you did when you were 8 years old, when you used to go to bed really early, and you wake up with so much energy.
That'd be nice.
Yeah.
And not relying on caffeine. I'm sure that's something that you're advocating as well, to not wake up and have multiple cups of coffee to get going for the day.
I don't think coffee is terrible, but what is coffee doing? It's just making up for the absence of coffee from yesterday. That's all it's doing. Now, I'm not a coffee. I don't personally like coffee, so I'm not bad mouthing it for that reason. But when you look at people who are big coffee drinkers, there have been some studies saying that it somehow has an anti-Alzheimer's effect. Maybe so. But it clearly affects personality. It clearly affects sleep. It makes it hard to have that real profound sleep. Same with alcohol. There are studies saying that if you have a drink or so a day, your Alzheimer's risk might be a little bit lower. This is some of the Mediterranean stuff. But breast cancer risk goes up even with one drink if it's every day. And it disrupts sleep. People who drink regularly just don't sleep very well because the alcohol converts to aldehydes in the middle of the night, and they're stimulants. And they make the world seem creepy, and it'll wake you up at 4:30 in the morning with all the problems of the day. So
all right,
be careful about those things.
Dr. Barnard, this has been great. I'm sure our listeners are going to love all this next level brain health information. How can they go and connect with you, reach out after the show, and find out more?
Oh man, I'll tell you, modern lifers, there's so many ways to connect. Our main website is pcrm.org, Physicians Committee for Responsible Medicine. We also have Facebook and Twitter and everything else, and I have my personal Facebook pages, which you'll see. And to help your brain, I have a new record coming out with my new band called Carbon Works, believe it or not, a little bit later this year, and it's all songs that are going to be really good for your brain.
Really cool.
Amazing. And you have just a few books.
Yeah, we got quite a lot, but each one is a tool.
Oh, no, they're amazing. Yeah,
so-
I've got a huge collection of them at home. So
Well, when we do research studies on diabetes or weight control or whatever, each one sort of gets distilled into what we think is the best information.
Thank you very much for your time, and wishing you all the best.
Sure, thank you. Thanks a lot.
Thank you.
Sure.